Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
John Riggio joining us again, our architect, our professional tennis player, author, and so much more. How are you doing today, darling?
Great. Thanks a lot, Jill. How are you?
Great. Excited to hear more about your tennis career and all the stories that come along with it. If you are tuning in for the first time, John is internationally known architect based out of New Jersey, does most of his work in the tri-state area. Besides that, what an amazing career he has had in tennis, in the tennis world, leading him to write his own book. And for those that don't know, John, just tell us briefly a little bit about yourself and we'll dive right into today's conversation before the new year.
Yes, my name is John Riggio. I'm an architect here in Metuchen, New Jersey. And I also was a pro tennis player many years ago. And from my podcast, I like to discuss my current profession, my office, my work. And then I also like to talk about some old stories from years ago. Uh, they're really interesting. So I think this year, since we're here on New Year's Eve, this was really excellent. I was able to write a book and publish it in February of 2025. And that was the book here, My Own Court, The Life Story of Tennis Legend John Riggio. This includes my tennis history from years ago, and it also has a lot of information about my architect profession too. The architect profession and my tennis were really combined together. This is how the whole thing started, that these two things would work good together. And presently, things are okay. Um, this year is very good. I was able to make the top 100 magazine for innovators and entrepreneurs. I'm on page 42. And this is the whole thing here. It isn't easy to get into this magazine, but showing the book and the story very clearly spelled out about my history, all those big numbers. My contract ended up at $150 million plus the monthly payments, which is the number one contract in tennis. And it was really big. The top 100 article, it describes those numbers, and um, it was really amazing. So this year has been really amazing as far as putting together the whole story and really getting some things in writing. And so as soon as my book was published in February, I kept thinking about all the things I left out of the book. Couldn't really write a 500-page book at one time. This book here, the hardcover, goes to the number of pages of 228 pages in the hardcover. But there's so many stories I left out and didn't really say all of them. But I think if you were to read the book, you really get a good idea. You don't really need a concise encyclopedia to get an idea of what was happening. And the top 100 article really sums up very well the whole idea. I was just thinking back now too. I think I was years ago. I was talking in the office with an architect that I was doing some work for. Just by chance, he knew Donald Trump, and he was able to give me some insight in 2 seconds about my office and thought I could really grow my office pretty large. He took 2 seconds. I was still learning. I was just graduating college, and he can tell in 2 seconds that my office, uh, as far as my getting a license and development office, could grow very large to a large size office. And I could tell in 2 seconds that I could do the work. Uh, what was happening from the last show, I had said a lot of interesting stories. So I think really just going from chronologically all the way back in time, one interesting tennis tip I have for people was you can use a rubber band to exercise your fingers. And so I think the last show I was saying you only need to use weights up to 30 pounds is what I told from my coach. Another interesting lesson coming through from pro tennis is when you're young or even when you're older getting into tennis, you find your hands, they need to become stronger. You have to get stronger hands and develop your muscles. And the way to do that is you take a rubber band and you just put it between your fingers and you expand the rubber band out and you bring it back down, you expand the rubber band. If you keep doing this like under your desk, like if you're in school, you say even elementary, middle school, high school, college, maybe depending on what you're doing for work, you can do this with your hands, and this will can exercise your muscles in your hands, and it makes uh, your hand become stronger to hold the tennis racket. And this is really a very simple exercise. And I really did do this when I was in middle school and high school. I used to exercise my fingers, like say I would go to the library reading. So my hands, I didn't really need to do anything. I'm reading a book on the table. I could exercise my fingers with these rubber bands, and I used to really do that. And this developed my muscles in my hands better,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to improve my tennis. I really went through all these little different things to get stronger at tennis, play better. When my coach would tell me these things, I believe what he's saying. My coach at that time was Anthony Cambria, and he was telling me these different lessons like this. And I think over the recent years, I was sort of backtracking, taking a look at some old videos, old Tony Roach videos, and some other videos. And these videos were explaining the same simple exercises for pro tennis. I think one interesting thing with the pro tennis is one of my sponsors, I was watching one of these training videos, and now that I'm remembering the names and who they are, I saw him there was another trainer. This is the next trainer was uh, when my contract had investments coming through Bernie Tapey and his friend with Reebok. So Bernie Tapey owned Adidas and his friend owned Reebok. And they put together this investment into my contract with the Mitsubishi from Japan. And from there, they gave me this contact, and his name was Jonathan. And he turned out to have been a great trainer. I just I was able to get one of the training videos. He was doing some work for them. They have a whole camp of tennis players. And he is the person that had called me on the phone from Britain and told me, and he was pretty impressed with my athletic report too, about my ability to have a really excellent health report. You know, my fat is only 3%, and all the different scores in the test they gave me. I received the top score in their pro tennis test. And this is like I explained before, that tennis test it isn't running a mile. It's really just like a 10-yard athletic ability to run and to do all kinds of different things like jumping forward and back. A lot of times those exercises are what people took in gym class in school. They had these little tests they used to give them to run side to side very fast. So that was the kind of test that I took. So all those informations went to Reebok, and since he is a athletic trainer, he was able to see that I had athletic ability. I don't know if he knew too much about my playing, but this whole thing with Reebok started to get things rolling again, which was really good. And it went over to to go not from Gloria Vanderbilt, but from Miss Leona Helmsley was able to pick up with Reebok to continue my playing over at the Sutton East in Manhattan, New York City. So that worked very good. And so I was able to locate this trainer, and he works in the same kind of thing of teaching pro tennis players, training them, explaining their physical health, things like that. I will get a copy of the picture. I have a video of him explaining that. I can get a little copy of it. I'll take a picture myself and just I could share it with you on another show. So this is some other different things that were going on, and I was able to finally recognize who it was that was my trainer from years ago. And so that was good. I think one thing from uh, the last podcast also was I was explaining that people were seeing my name as John Rigo. And this name was working very good. It was working very good with my girlfriend, Delilah. And this was working very, very good with tennis. The other tennis sponsors was explaining that that name just changing around my last name just a little, making it real simple, was working very good. They liked it because it was very good, say like a north, east, south, west. They could even look at the name and think it's names that you know. So that was pretty good. The one thing I had to remember is wondering why the name from Alley Pond. I had the Alley Pond Tennis Center with my sponsor in the borough of Queens in New York City. And from there, it moved over to the Sutton East Tennis Center in Manhattan, New York. So between that change, there was a change in sponsors. But I had to remember the details of why the name didn't stay the same. So since the name was very successful and it worked very good, that kind of work is didn't really need anything, any legal papers or anything to use that name. It turns out to continue the name from one sponsor to another, they wanted more money. And that is the reason why the name didn't continue on. There was no real reason. There was nothing wrong going on. There were no problems. The name really had a value and money to it to keep the name. And that is why the name did not go from when I was playing at my tennis center in Alley Pond to Sun East in Manhattan. That is the real reason there was a real dollar value in continuing the name. But unfortunately, the idea of just getting a new name and continuing to play with it started to put a lot of stress on my sponsors. Gloria Vanderbilt called over to the ATP about the name, and instead of the name just going ahead, they gave us a lot of problems proposing some names, changing the names, became a lot of problems. I think looking back at it, and I think I might have even said back then, was to continue using John Rigo. But I think I think the idea of using John Rigo might have been a good decision. They could have very possibly continued to use the name and then at some point could have made a monetary agreement after the name proved to be successful to continue the name. Um, but what happened is instead of getting into changing the name, at that time it was changed over to John Vanderbilt, the name really they thought was a trick. It wasn't really that good. Although the name using the name is excellent name, a lot of people like it. It turns out to have been more like a trick that they were doing something wrong to me. And then I was also told I'm not allowed to use that name because of the special rules they have of certain names. People always like to do a con artist thing of using certain names like Vanderbilt, other names, and going out and knowing they can do all kinds of funny things with those names. So the that became a big problem. It became like a big stress. And I think even at that time, all the papers, the trophies, awards that I received, they always had my natural name somewhere, knowing who the player name and who the player was connecting together. So this problem from going from John Rigo over to changing it to John Vanderbilt was a little stressful. There was some problems, and I thought it was sticky about a years later. I think you continue using the name. Maybe they could have just paid money when it became a big profit to continue the same name. Some people already started to get used to that name. I think I was even explaining the administration at Yale watched me on TV with that name. It was already going around. They could identify with the name, and it was very similar to my natural name. I think some players, like I was talking about last week, like Vitas Gervais, his name, all it was is a shortened version of his natural name. He didn't even get a special name. In fact, that player never even had a sponsor his whole career. Which was very interesting. So going through all these big sponsors, paperwork, my sponsors, particularly from Richard Branson to Gloria Vanderbilt, they all had their paperwork in order, all official business paperwork, licenses. Everything was done 100% with lawyers. The lawyer deal between Richard Branson and Gloria Vanderbilt was done with the help of Michael Cohen that everyone saw in the news over the last few years. And so this was all big things. And so I think that was really one interesting. So I'm just remembering back, it was really a amount of money. I don't know how much money it was. It might have been in the millions of dollars to continue the name. But I think given the trouble that started to take place, because when they called to someone in the ATP, they were calling someone who was really like had such a type of personality that was really like a joker of some kind. They weren't talking to someone who was really trying to be helpful and sound. Like he didn't say just keep using the same name. Just to 5 seconds, he could say continue using the same name that I already had because there was no objection to using my name. They sort of liked it, and it was simple, and this is it. But I think talking to this guy on the phone turned out to be someone he has started to do all kinds of fun. He started to do this joke with my sponsor that my name had to be one of her relatives' last names that I would use like Cooper or other names like Morgan. I mean, this was really unbelievable. So I think talking to this guy to just do a changeover to another name became a big problem. And this guy has such an interesting way of talking. It started to cause a big problem. So since they had that name John Rigo at the Alipan, continuing on would have been the simplest and soundest way to do it. It went very good. I think just thinking back to some things about when I thought the name was helping out was really my girlfriend Delilah, and her last name I had to remember the name. Her name was Guo. She used to pronounce it Jew, but it's yes, it's that was her name, and I think things somehow were very good with that. I think Branson, who was a neighborhood friend, helped that whole story out. That a lot of these things were coming through just a local effort, and it was very interesting. And I think somehow I remember things were coming together pretty good at that point. But the name story going from there to Manhattan complicated some problems there. It didn't really have to change. There was no objection to the names, and it was really a matter of money on the contract that was holding using the name. And I think the knowing from some experiences and things like that, that can happen. It turns out in sports, when they were raising the contract price up, thinking it was going way past what someone could pay for it, somehow they were able to put investors together. I think when my contract price went all the way up to some numbers around uh 25 million and things like that, and they were and $30 million, they're wondering how they can pay that much money. They have to put investors together. And that is one interesting thing about sports. I noticed that they were really doing a difficult deal, and amazingly, a lot of those deals went through. The deal with the name staying the same and paying additional amount of money, they didn't really put that much effort into it. It was easier just to make the phone call. I think making that phone call to change the name became like something that this guy on the other side of the phone was able to really exploit as like a joke that he was making in his mind. I cannot believe it. Talking to my sponsors, they were wondering who this was on the other side of the phone that they talked to and could act outrageous. Because years previously, he had this thing about making my name John Holton, and it was such a disaster that even back then they wondered why, when they started talking to this person on the phone from the ATP, that he was like making like a joke. He was doing this. So I think the best thing with keeping John Riggio was sort of keep a little stability, and would also make it like we don't have a problem that we have to call this guy on the phone at the ATP. Calling him on the ATP, I think he saw maybe a vulnerability, like there is something going wrong. And then was just going to make a joke of it, laughing, that he has another name. So they were probably wondering what's happening. So that is one unfortunate thing that was going on. This is another memory of happening, and this was outrageous. I think in the end, the whole thing with my name changing, the idea overall is what I have been doing now is taking all the names and just putting it under my natural name. It's the easiest way to do it. And I think a lot of people they do things like that. There are some other players that use their natural name, and they don't seem to have any problem. Um, there's the player Michael Chang in California. He uses his natural name for his law business, and he uses it for his tennis, and he's never had one problem with it. He told me personally the same thing. I think he was even interested to maybe work as a duple lawyer for me. I mean, he's saying the same thing, that legally it's the best way to do it is to just use your natural name. He's never had one. For me, they called the ATP and it became a big uh joke. The guy on the other side was just treating everyone like they had some kind of a problem, and he was just gonna make a joke of everything. So that was really one strange thing. So I think one last interesting thing is when I was younger, with my sponsorship since I was 9, and then particularly when I was signed a contract with India Cambria to play pro tennis with the National Tennis Center in Flushing, New York City. I had a whole bunch of new friends, and one of them, of course, was my new girlfriend, Delilah Jules. She was my girlfriend, but it turns out she wasn't the first girlfriend I made in entertainment. And before that, I knew Miss Robin Mead. She was right there in my, I think it was like my sixth grade class. I met her in art class, and I think she eventually was on television as a news reporter. So I met her, and then I think at that time we used to like to go to the mall. I used to meet Delilah there. Robin Mead was there, and then two other people I didn't talk about who were there. Very interesting were really Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. I was introduced to them, and I saw them over the years after that. They really liked to watch my tennis. So just amazingly, I knew them too when they were younger. They used to come to that mall. I think no one knows it, but the Broadway Mall was the center of a lot of people.
I still love that mall.
Everyone was there. It's just an ordinary place.
I love that mall.
And then I think on other days I would also maybe go to the video game room and go there with Delight. And you know who was also there was another interesting friend, was another friend I was introduced to from Delight was Annette. And Annette, very interestingly, she ended up getting a stage name. She ended up getting a stage name that a lot of people know called Black Diamond. and this is in the adult film industry.
Mm-hmm.
And but originally I knew her as Annette, and but she got that name, and she was friends with Delilah, and we were also friends. And very interestingly, she somehow stayed with that, and we end up having the same sponsor, Ross Perot, at one point.
Oh, I remember him.
Black Diamond is really based off something like you'd have called Black Gold in Texas. I even bought this book called Black Diamond just over the last couple of years, just to remind myself of this whole story that in Texas the oil they were calling it like black gold, like it's a black diamond. So then and at that point we also were able to meet again under Ross Perot as my sponsor, and I met her again, and she was there at ringside. Her contract was large. She had a very large contract. So my contract was just made the 30 million, and her contract was a similar size contract. So she was there again. So from years previous in the video game room, we had met again there, and that was really very interesting. I think one interesting lesson of the whole thing with a lot of times meeting people was I didn't want to say it, but Delilah somehow, when I first met her, uh, she turned out to have connected with me as really like my wife in entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like my one wife in entertainment, because whenever the idea of changing her from that position could never go. There was no way to do it, and I essentially kept it together. And what happened was, so she was really like my one wife in entertainment at that time. Unfortunately, by the time in 1996, she had so many personal problems with her family and her father that she ended up
Oh,
passing away. And that
mm.
was really a sad story. That's problems that she ended up having on her own, had nothing to do uh, with me, and she ended up having problems. But from when I was younger to that time, she was still there in entertainment. And I think the one shining moment was really also at the Audi Pond with my name was John Rigo, and she
Yep.
showed up with all her friends.
Oh,
Dorothy Hamill showed up to see the match in person. That was sort of like a ringside of watch.
always news stories, John. We got 35 seconds left. I'm so sorry to have to wrap you,
That's
but I
really
love
interesting
hearing your
story.
stories. Continue,
Yeah,
continue.
I think so. Those stories are always interesting to listen to. I always like to share the stories. I think they were really held dormant, and I didn't say anything. I was also told by my coach not really to say too much at my age about my career. From one, they could steal from me, end it. Another thing I was told, some people could get angry and want to try to cause me problems. So I think years later now, I'm 57 years old, and a lot of these stories are coming out now. I'm putting them in there, and they're good to read about in my book, and fun to listen to.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. As always, how can we contact you?
Of course, for tennis, you go onto Facebook, John Riggio, professional tennis player, or www.johnriggio.com. You can see my professional site there. If you have any questions, you should go onto one of my pages and you could send me a message.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you. Happy New Year. We'll talk again next year. Enjoy the night.
Thanks. Happy New Year to you, Jill. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.